111 of Coffee and Co-Read, your source for all things literary with Catherine
and Kristen, where we believe there's nothing better than a hot coffee and an awesome book. Join us for our virtual book club where we take one book a month and dive into all the drama, adventure, and romance we can find. Hi, Catherine.
Hey, Kristen.
So, we're talking about series today, and we've sort of delved a lot into series, how we feel about them. Obviously, we're lovers of series because we do almost exclusively series on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
However, today we're gonna dive a little bit into falling in and out of series. Like, does it happen to you? Do you know why? And like, how you feel about falling in and out of love with a series, I guess.
Yeah. I guess I feel like we've talked about a few things to do with it, but like I find if it's a series that I like and a few books are out and then I have to wait for another book, I can easily fall out of the series. Like, it happened to both of us with From Blood and Ash, where we read the first few and then we got into the, I think, third one, maybe fourth one.
We had to wait for the third one to come out.
Yeah, and then we were confused because we forgot what happened to the first two. Also, it was just confusing, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, I've even reading all, like, 1 and 2 back to back and then going right into book 3, I was still confused.
Yeah. So, that's a thing that I find. If there's a wait and I'm not reading a series back to back to back to back, and I don't love the series so much that I'm gonna reread it, then I can fall out of love with a series. Like, especially if there's so many books in it. Like, a series that we've loved recently is the Imperium series or whatever, Fourth Wing series.
Yes.
I worry there are too many books in the series that I'm like, there's another one coming out January. I'm gonna read it. I pre-ordered it. But I'm also like, it's just so long between them. There's going to be another year until the next one. And like, I don't know. I kind of get over when relationships in books, because mostly what we read is romantasy. That's like obviously a given. But when a couple gets together and then the author's like, we need to create tension or strife or whatever. And then I'm like, I don't need this.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what is the point of this? Like, I don't know. To write more books, I guess. But I'm like, we could have just stopped after the first book and been happy.
Yeah. I feel like one of the big, I'm not going to say it's a problem, but one of the big, so back like 10, 15 years ago, the big thing was trilogies. Everybody was writing trilogies. It was 3-book series all the time.
Yeah.
Now I feel like, I don't even know what started it. And like, I'm not saying that there were no series that were longer than 3 or shorter than 3. Obviously there were. But like, a lot of books were going like, the popular books, like Hunger Games was turned into a movie. That was 3 books. Divergent was turned into a movie. That was 3 books. Like, I'm sure there's more. Those are just the only ones that like I can automatically think of. So, like, all of these books that were being turned into movies were trilogies, and I just thought, like, the same thing we were talking about a couple weeks ago, like, the, like, the tropes of, like, the love triangle. It was a huge thing, like, you know what I mean? So, I feel like this, it was another sort of thing of, I can't make a standalone book, I gotta make a series of 3. Now I feel like the pressure is on even more to make more involved series because of the popularity, and people like more, like, obviously if we fall in love with a character, we want more of that character.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right? So like, I feel like authors are feeling pressure to write more complex and involved stories because they think it's what they're audience wants. And it is, but I also feel like they need to think about, well, what story do I have in my head? What serves my characters the best? And how many books can I get this done in? Because I agree with you. Now I'm terrified to read Iron Flame, especially since I've heard some people be like, oh, I think it's a lovers to enemies trope, where her and Xaden are together now, but by the time the 5th book comes around, they can't still be together, because that's wild to have your main characters get together in book 1.
It's very similar to shows. Like, you watch shows and the couple is flirting around forever and ever, and then finally they get together, and it's every fucking show. It's Psych, it's Bones, it's I'm sure it happened in Criminal Minds at some point.
Castle.
CSI, Castle, everything. They are dancing around it for the first 5 seasons. Then finally they get together, and then they're like, now we are gonna have to break them up, because what's left? What's the point? What is happening? So, I don't know. I don't care for it as much.
Yeah. And I think that's my problem. So the reason this conversation sort of came up is because I discovered a book series. It was in one of my Facebook groups that I'm just obsessed. Somebody was like, I need a recommendation. I finished ACOTAR. I've read TOG. I've read Crescent City. I've read them all. What should I read next that's got sort of a similar vibe? And a bunch of people wrote, you should read the Plated Prisoner series. Mm-hmm. And it's by Raven, Raven Kennedy. So I was like, okay, let me see what this is about. So I just happened to notice that it was available on Kindle Unlimited for free. And I was like, oh, well, this is handy. So I started reading it.
Yeah.
And I really liked it. The premise is really cool. It's sort of fae human stuff, but also King Midas sort of theme, that sort of story. So I started reading it midnight on Thursday night. Woke up the next morning, and I essentially powered through 3 books the very next day, which is
insane.
Yeah, I essentially read all day. Yeah. And I couldn't put it down because it was so good. By the end of the 3rd book, the couple you want to get together. So the end game couple,
hopefully there's 6 books in the series.
Well,
I'm sure there's
okay, fine, yes. Yeah. The couple that they seem to want to get together and stay together in the whole series are together by the end of book 3. However, it sort of does end a little bit cliffhangery. However, the main villain is not a problem anymore. The main character is sort of has discovered their true power, sort of a thing. But then the book 4 starts, and the character's all melodramatic, and they're about to go into a shitstorm of political stuff, and it's just the book 2 had a shit ton of had pirates. You know what I mean? And it had snow pirates.
Yeah.
It was just so
super interesting shit.
Interesting and action-packed. And then book 4 is starts off, and I'm about 25% through it. And the main character, who's super powerful and always looks on the bright side of things and is supposed to be finally happy with the person she's chosen. And she's meh, I'm all dramatic and depressed. Yeah. And it's just sort of you could have stopped it at book 3. Why are we continuing? You know what I mean? I would have been happy to finish book 3. And you read it, and I actually texted you and said, But, like, this is funny, because I actually texted you, and I was like, oh my god, this book is amazing, you need to read it, when I was starting it, or, like, I was on book 2, and I was like, have you heard of this book series? Read it, please. And you were like, yeah, I did. And then you told me that you stopped in book 4 as well, because it was sort of, again, like, just, it wasn't vibing.
Yeah, I just re-downloaded it on Kindle Unlimited, and I got to 9% of the 4th book. But, like, I devoured the first 3 and was like, the premise was just so good. Like, I love the premise. And then once that storyline finished, I was like, why would I continue?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it's just, it's unfortunate that people feel like, oh, I gotta keep this. And maybe, who knows, maybe the author intended to make this, like, internal struggle to give her character, like, you know, a human sort of, not everything is always good. We're not always happy. Sometimes we go through depression and blah, blah, blah. Which is fine.
Yeah.
But I also...
we have praised in other books.
Yes.
But I think the difference is, like, specifically, I'm thinking of, like, Throne of Glass. That has a bajillion books, and it has strife, and it has bullshit, and, like, although I did re-listen to the last one recently, and, like, there are 2 secondary couples in it that are, like, having issues, and I'm like, I don't think this was necessary. There's so much other storyline. I don't know why we need these 2 couples to, like, hate each other right now so that they can have a dramatic get back together. Like, it still had some of that stuff, but there just was so much other story to it that I loved that I kind of got past it. And it was mostly only this reread that I was kind of like, I'm over this. I don't care about it anymore. And it's like maybe my, like, 15th reread of the book. But yeah, I'm kind of over this whole, like, let's put these couples together and then separate them. Like, why? And most of the time it's a communication thing. And I'm like, seriously? Or it's like someone's not getting their needs met. And you're like, if you had a serious conversation with your partner about, hey, this is how I'm feeling, and I need you to do this, this, and this to meet it. If that cannot happen, then we need to go our separate ways. Like,
yeah.
Obviously, fantasy characters aren't going to do that, but
yeah,
it's healthy.
Yeah, and I know, and I feel like I don't want to harp on, like, because you're right, we have praised the whole, like, loving it when people go through, like, all the emotions and people having PTSD. I feel like they still need to be them.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, yes, they can go through stuff, but, like, you still need to act like you as a character. And, like, somebody, I don't know, it was just a jarring for this particular series. It was just really jarring for this character to sort of get their happy ending, get their, like, get what they needed to get, and then all of a sudden they're like a droopy, dreary mess that's, like, ignoring all their problems.
Yeah. When, like,
so, but again,
realistically, they were in a worse spot originally than they are now.
Yes,
and
I don't understand the guilt, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, somebody did something really bad to you, you came back at it tenfold, like, you know, they got what was coming to them, like, don't feel bad about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
But it's just, for that specific series, it's funny that we both stopped. And the same thing literally happened with From Blood and Ash. We both stopped in, like, these 2 series. We both stopped in the exact same spots because we just were like, it wasn't talking to us anymore. It wasn't working for us anymore. And that's just interesting.
Yeah.
Only a small sample size, but...
a very, very small sample size. But, I mean, I've heard lots of people I've heard from a ton of people who've also stopped on book 3 and did not finish book 3
because Blood and Ash.
Yeah,
me too.
I mean, I don't. Again, sample size is not the same for the other book because I don't think it's as popular. But, anyway, So I highly recommend the first 3 books of the Plated Prisoner series by Raven Kennedy. I think the first one is called Guild. So
yes,
definitely check out the first 3. And if you feel differently about book 4 and you think I need to power through it, let me know, please, because I really need someone to tell me that it's going to get better.
Yeah, and unfortunately I couldn't do that. But if it does get better, like, I'd read it too. I think it was the first time I had Kindle Unlimited, and I got to the 4th one, and I was like, there's definitely something I would prefer to read other than this. And it was just so easy to skip over to a different book and not continue. So yeah, if you really liked the rest of the series, and you think it's worthwhile, please let us know. But, like, I love the idea. The idea of it is just so, like...
Interesting.
And, like...
Do you know what? I almost wish the main bad guy in that series, I almost wish what happened didn't happen.
Yeah.
I almost wish, like, that he got further with his plan, that she sort of did, like, maybe... I'm trying not to spoil it, but...
Yeah.
That his plan maybe failed, but she managed to, like, accomplish part of her task. And, like, he also, like, you know, still managed to, like, accomplish part of his task. And, like, I just wish the next books would, like, keep that opposition going. Instead of what actually happened. Yeah.
It's hard. It is hard when you have a big bad and then you're going to somebody else. Like, I found that issue with, like, the Akhtar books after they finished their main trilogy. I'm like, I don't really understand what is happening in the technically 4th book of the series. Like, I don't know who this big bad is and what is even happening anymore. But well, no spoilers, but...
Well, and all hell's gonna break loose in the next one based on...
Yeah.
Everything that we've just figured out.
Yeah.
We've talked about this a lot.
Happening. Yes. We didn't even mean to. We were like, what are we even going to talk about today? Here we are.
30 minutes later. I just said, I feel like we could totally talk about this for ages.
Oh, 100%. We could talk about anything for ages. That's just who we are.
That's true.
So yeah. Just a heads up, though, this is not a spoiler-free zone, and things might get saucy.
They won't.
No, it's still a YA book. So, this week is week 2 of Kingdom of the Wicked. We're doing chapters 13 to 23. So last week we met our main character, Emilia, and she... had a twin sister who was unfortunately murdered, and her heart was taken.
Ripped out?
Ripped out. And she actually, unfortunately, found the body, which is obviously devastating. But she saw somebody standing over the body, and then she found her sister's diary, which she couldn't open, and she found some grimoire pages. Also, they're witches. That wasn't something I mentioned, but it's a thing. And there was a summoning spell, so she summoned a demon, and it ended up being the same guy that was over her sister's body. And he is actually one of the princes of hell, and his name is Wrath. And he wanted to do a blood trade with her and make her a part of his house. And she bound him to her circle with, like... I forget the exact wording, but it was like to protect her forever, basically. And he was like, shit, that's not good. And she didn't understand why, and she felt very cocky. And I'm sure that won't come back to bite her at all. So this week, our chapters start with, like, some of the chapters we talked about last week start with, like, the grimoire, the family grimoire, and it's kind of like a warning most of the time, but this one says, a blood trade with a prince of hell allows the prince to have a connection with a witch, and it's unsure how long that could possibly last, and that a bond from love is as dangerous as a bond from hate. So that's interesting, because the whole point of last week was she said that she would not accept his blood trade, and it really seemed like he wanted to make a blood trade with her. So something's on the go. We don't know everything. So Emilia is at dinner service, and it's the night after she summoned Wrath, and she took the dagger back from him because she had it from when he was lying over her dead sister, and she found it, and now she's still, like, she summoned him with it, and then she took it back, and he's still in his little summoning circle.
Yeah.
But she thinks about how she wants to go interrogate Wrath again, and he's still bound, and she also cast a containment spell, and she knows that he wants to find her sister's murderer, and that he wants to do, like, a blood bond with her, whatever that means. So she thinks that she has a bunch of leverage here, and that she can go ask him whatever she wants, and, like, he'll answer it. Her grandmother is super cryptic and super, like, as they were growing up, telling them stories about the Wicked, and they never really believed it, but, like, now it's obviously, some of it's true. But she also knows that, like, something is up, and she tells Emilia that it ends tonight because the full moon is coming. And, like, I think the prequel was during the full moon, was when they were, like, redoing their amulets and stuff, because the Wicked are, like, more powerful when there's a full moon.
Mm-hmm.
But she tells Emilia that, like, nothing will bring Vittoria back, and her vengeance will curse her whole family. And you're like, this isn't really helpful when someone's grieving. Like, I don't.
But
think
also,
it's, like...
it's been like 3 weeks. Like,
yeah.
I feel like you can't be like, listen, your twin is dead. Get over it. Yeah. After like 3 weeks. Like, yeah. As much as I love Nona Maria, I think this is a bit, I don't know, maybe not the right time.
She's not a grief counselor. I'm gonna say that off the bat. She doesn't, yeah, it's not a great look. Yeah, so Emilia kind of just ignores what she says, because otherwise where would the book go? And then she ends up going to the market after her shift to buy a shirt. And then she tries to, like, rush to the cavern before the sun sets, because the Wicked can't be outside in sunlight, is one of the things that her grandmother's told her. So she's worried that if she doesn't get back to this cavern before the sun sets, then Wrath might find a way out of her containment. While she's leaving the market, though, she sees Claudia, who is her friend that we heard about last week, but she's been ignoring because she's grieving. And Claudia, like, stops her and gives her a giant hug, and she says it doesn't feel real that Vittoria is dead. And you're like, I don't know what Emilia needs, but I feel like she needs somebody in her life who... I don't know. There's no right thing to say when somebody dies, and, like, I know that, but I'm like, I feel like she needs somebody who's putting her grief before theirs, and, like, I feel like nobody is doing that, and I know that's not the point of the book, but maybe if somebody did, she wouldn't be so vengeful at this. I don't know. It's not the point, but...
Yeah. But then, like, just on top of that, though, it, like, I don't think either of us have ever really experienced somebody being murdered close to us, right? Like, neither of us have experienced that. Like, so I don't know. Maybe I would be if somebody that I loved had been murdered and the police had no leads, I'd be pissed.
Yeah,
all the time.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, maybe, like, I agree with you in terms of the grief aspect, but I also feel like I don't know. I just feel like I would also be angry all the time. And I would probably be like, "What? The police can't do it. I will."
Yeah, I guess, like, I don't know. I have gone through intense grief of somebody dying.
Yes.
And, like, it was a medical condition we didn't know about. But, like, I had so many people that were, like, put me first. And, like, it was obvious to me, and it just helped me so much. And I feel so bad for her because I feel like nobody is putting her first. And it's her literal twin. Like,
yeah.
I can't think of anybody closer to you, especially when you're her age, like 18, and you're in the same bedroom your entire life. Like, it's like,
yeah.
It just hits me in these moments, and I'm like, I don't know. I just feel so bad for her, and I can see why she's doing what she's doing, because it's like, grief's a fuckery. But yeah, Claudia does kind of like, I first read that and I was like, it's not about you, but I know I'm also super sensitive to grief things. But she does kind of like redeem herself in my eyes, I guess, which is like not really the point, but she says that she's been having strange dreams, and Emilia knows that, like, Claudia actually has visions. They're not really dreams, but she says that she saw black wings and a pitcher being filled and empty, and she thinks a terrible darkness is coming or is already here. And Amelia's kind of like, shit, this is about me summoning Wrath, but she tells Claudia that it's probably just explaining Victoria's death, and like that's probably why she's having them. But Claudia tells her after that Domenico is a mess, and he visits the monastery like twice a week to pray. And Domenico is a guy that we've only heard about, that Victoria had a crush on, and Emilia read about him in her diary. So Emilia's kind of surprised because she didn't really think that like they were a couple in like public or anything like that. Like, she even says like he didn't ask their father to court her or something, and you're like, what is the time period?
So I'm reading book 2 as we speak, and I can safely assume it is not current.
Okay.
Like, I think safely we could say 18 to 1900s.
Oh, okay. That makes more sense.
There actually is, in the second book, she thinks about, it's not central to the plot at all.
Yeah.
But she thinks about how, like, in society, men are, like, allowed to have, like, a robust sexual appetite, and how, like, they're allowed to have many sexual partners, and how, like, the more they have, once they finally get married, they'll be able to please their wife more. But women are like expected to stay virgins until marriage and stuff like that. So yeah, I think 18 to 1900s is a decent guess, especially where I think, did you say last week that like the nonas, like, you don't need to get married yet?
Yeah.
And they're like 18, so, you know, it sort of, I feel like, makes a bit of sense, because I feel like the age was going up a little bit then. Like, it was more okay to get married at like 20, 21, so.
Yeah, and it seems like the Nona's more like feminist, progressive, like.
Yeah.
It's not all about marriage for her. Yeah. So that kind of makes sense. It's just interesting. So yeah. Emilia also thinks like she should probably talk to Domenico at some point, because we've never seen her have a conversation with him, so I don't know if she ever has or not, but I guess we'll find that out. Claudia also tells her that Fratello Antonio is worried about her, and that is her old next door neighbor that she was in love with, who is now a brother. And Claudia suggests that she talk to him, but she thinks to herself, like, he can't help her with vengeance and would probably suggest, like, prayer and solace to her. So she is kind of isolating herself. Which is, like, a common grief thing. But Claudia also tells her that she misses her because Emilia hasn't spoken to her in about the, 3 weeks since her sister died. And she tells Emilia that she is only alone if she chooses to be, and that Emilia is alive and loved, and that Claudia wants to help if Emilia will let her. Which I appreciate all of that. I think that is, such a, it's the most supportive thing I've seen anybody say to Emilia. And, it's kind of where I would kind of turned around and was like, oh, I think, Claudia she's doing her best. It is hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Nona needs to be the one to step up here. Because obviously the mother and father are probably too lost in their own.
Yeah.
Not that the Nona isn't upset. I'm sure she is. It's her grandchild. But I feel like she's a little bit more spiritual and, a little bit more, it's what the goddess sort of, we have to have faith in the goddess, that sort of thing. So, she's the one that sort of seems like she's holding it all together.
And I think you even said last week, it kind of seems like there's something going on that she knew before it happened.
Yeah.
She's not completely in the dark here. We can kind of assume in a way.
Yeah.
Well, assume as much as we can without having read much further. But yeah. Emilia actually decides to let Claudia help and actually gives her Vittoria's diary and asks her to try and figure out the spell. And then she, goes to leave, but a shadow looms over them and hisses, "He's here." And Emilia recognizes it as the voice from the night that her sister died, when she kind of thought she was going insane and hearing things. And she asks who, and the voice doesn't answer her. And Claudia's like, "What are you talking about? You just, freaked out. What's going on?" Because Claudia didn't hear anything. So that's interesting. Don't know what that's all about, but it's only her that's hearing it, so more of a reason for her to think that she's, hallucinating, really.
Yeah.
So she ends up leaving Claudia, and she goes to see Wrath, and she throws this shirt that she got at the market at him. And she tells him to put it on, but he refuses, so they argue. And it's, pretty hot.
Yeah, so, she's like, I don't want to look at his hot body, so, put this shirt on.
Yeah.
And he's like, this shirt is terrible quality. I refuse to wear it. And she's like, I just don't want to look at you and be attracted to you.
I love it. And, I love how much he loves clothes. It's,
yeah.
It becomes a theme, and I'm a big fan. But I'm like, it's just so funny. But yeah, he won't put it on. He refuses. So they argue a bit, and he says that, witches call them wicked, but witches are vengeful creatures without soul or conscience. And that she does not own him by summoning him, and he can and will deny her whenever he chooses. She doesn't wield power other than this spell, which won't last. And we kind of get that the containment spell that she used on him will only last 3 days, which is the same as the amount of time that the summoning spells last. So that's interesting. I guess, do most spells just last 3 days? Is that just a... Don't know. So she asks him...
Sorry. Yeah. I really like that he doesn't give her everything she asks for. Because, she was really cocky going into this deal. And I just really like that he's like, man, I just like that he's like, girl, I don't have to do anything for you. I don't have to tell you anything. I'm going to be out of here in 2 days.
Yeah.
Just because you summoned me here does not mean that I owe you shit. And I like that.
I agree. I'm like, he's not wrong. And she's so she's so cocky about it all, and I'm like, you shouldn't be. Like, even not knowing what's gonna happen, I'm like, maybe you should chill a bit. But yeah, she asks him for information then, and she kind of implies that she's gonna agree to the blood bond. So he agrees to give her some information, and she asks about witch hunters. But he kind of just says that, like, he knows that witch hunters are a thing throughout time, but he doesn't think that, like, they're on the go right now in this world. Like, he doesn't think that they're to blame. And that is, like, her sole... what's the word? Oh my god. Suspects? Her sole suspects, are witch hunters. But he doesn't think that they're actually, like, things right now. So that's interesting. And she asks what brother her sister made a bond with, and he responds, pride. And she thinks, and I think you said this last week, because we had a conversation about the different sins and what they're related to, but she says that pride is associated with the devil himself. And I think, like, I can't remember, it might have been like Lucifer is pride? Was that what it was?
Yeah.
Who, Lucifer is synonymous with Satan, the devil, like...
Can I just say...
Yeah.
I don't know if I skipped over this line or if maybe it just wasn't as firm as I needed it to be.
Mm-hmm.
But her just saying pride is related to the devil, is associated with the devil.
Yeah.
To me, that is not enough of an indicator that the Prince of Hell, Pride, is the devil.
That's fair.
Like, I didn't get that. I'm pretty, like, I was just thinking of Pride as another Prince of Hell, and the devil was someone else.
Yeah.
I think until, like, over halfway through the book.
That's fair. Well, and also, like, pride is an attribute that you could put on the devil, but you can also put wrath on the devil. You can put envy on the devil. The whole point of Lucifer is that he was envious of God's other creatures. Like, you can put all of these sins that we've seen. So, like, it isn't explicitly stated, but it was also my section, so I read more into it than you probably did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, like, that's sort of the problem, though, is because when they introduce the Malvagi...
Yeah.
When they introduce them as, like, the 7 princes of hell, you assume that then there's a king of hell.
Mm-hmm.
And that's... So, like, I was... In my head, I was like, okay, well, there's the 7 princes plus the devil.
Yes.
So, it took way longer than I care to admit for me to make the connection that when they talk of pride... Because a lot of it comes back to pride now. Like, we're going to talk about him a lot.
Yes.
So it just took a lot longer to figure out that when they're talking about pride, they're talking about the devil.
Yeah, that's fair.
So.
Because, yeah, we kind of had this conversation last week, too, I think, of, like, there's 7 princes, and then there's the devil. Like, it seemed like it was a separate thing, the way that it was said in the first week.
Yeah.
So, yeah, she makes a connection between the two, but it's not explicitly stated. And she also thinks back to a memory of Vittoria teasing her and saying she summoned the devil and will marry him, but Emilia can't go to the wedding because it's going to take place in hell. And Emilia was like, oh, she's just, like, making a joke, obviously, because if someone said that to you in real life, you wouldn't assume that they were telling the truth. But she asks Wrath why Pride wanted to marry Vittoria. And, like, Wrath didn't tell her that it was a marriage thing. He just said that she made a deal with a prince. And then he said that the prince was Pride. She put it together because she remembered her sister saying it. So she asked.
Right. Yes, her sister joked around in the first one when they were hanging out in their room. She was like, what did you do tonight? And she was like, oh, I'm going to marry the devil, but you probably can't come because it's probably going to be in hell.
Yeah.
And she's assuming that wasn't a joke now.
Which is so funny. And, like, I don't know. I'm like, you should have realized that wasn't... This is a fantasy book. You should have realized she wasn't she wasn't joking. So yeah. So she asks why Pride wanted to marry Victoria, because she's like, she's just a human witch. Not a human witch, but like, she's just a witch that lives in the world. But Wrath tells her that Pride needs to marry a witch to break a curse. And Wrath is helping him by bringing the witch to hell, basically, for the marriage. So that is his job in all of this. And all of the witches that have been murdered were killed after talking to Wrath. So she asks him who from his realm knows, like, who he's offering these bargains to. And he says it's only him and Pride. So she's like, shit, that means that, like, the leaky faucet of who's telling people about this is probably the witches themselves. Like, they're the ones that are letting it slip, that they're, like, getting into a bargain.
Obviously, it's more than him and Pride, because he's getting
so
messengers to deliver it. So that's obviously more than just him and Pride. Pride is not directly talking to him. It's like Pride has a messenger and then gives it to another messenger and then gives it, like, it's just...
Yeah, he's being foolish when he just answers that way, because you're like... And she never really... I don't know, I haven't gotten super far into the book yet, but, like, she called him out for being like, hey, you said it was no one else. Clearly there's messengers. Like...
Yeah. The issue is that he is just, like, a pompous jackass and doesn't consider lesser beings, like...
Yeah.
Like, they don't count.
One could say it's his pride. So yeah.
I mean, he is a demon, so, like, I guess we can't expect him to be, like, a paragon of virtue.
Although, he's, like, super polite. Like, continuously the most polite, like, main male character in a book I've ever read.
Yeah.
So, she moves on and asks who the next witch is, but he says he's not going to tell her. And she thinks to herself, like, it would be too hard to warn the 12 other witch families that are around, because they're trying to not, like, incriminate each other by talking to each other, basically. So she kind of just hopes that these witch families have realized that witches are dying and that they're going to put up their defenses on their own. You're like, I guess? I feel like she could have maybe done more, but I don't know. He asks her then if she's ready to join House of Wrath, but she says she won't until he decides to work with her as an equal, and he says that she should let him out to go with her wherever she's going tonight because it isn't safe, and she just says, next time, and he says, it's her funeral. And you're like, she kind of implied that she was going to agree to become part of his house when she, like, started this information sharing conversation. So, like, I'm not mad at him for being like, so are you going to do it now? And it is a bit of foreshadowing for literally what happens next. So she's on her way to the monastery because she wants to talk to, I'm assuming, Domenico. And she feels someone watching her, so she goes down an empty street in case she needs to use her magic. She doesn't want, like, the random civilians to see it because they'll burn her at the stake. So she goes down the street and she holds her cornicello, and a low voice from the shadows says, "This is a surprise." And he looks human, but he has animal green eyes. You're like, green eyes? Wonder who that is. And she can also see his lucicare, which is strange and glittering. So she knows that he too is a Malvagi. So she kind of is like studying him, and he tells her that he's envy, and you're like, could have got that from the green eyes, but I appreciate the, like, I don't know what that is, the detail. Like, I like that his eyes are green, because it makes sense for people to call jealous people like the green-eyed monster and stuff. I do appreciate a connection there. But she is basically talking to him a bit, and he tells her that she's intriguing, and she's actually terrified of him. And, like, the kind of terrified that she should have been of Wrath, but just wasn't for some reason. She's finally feeling it now. And she wonders why two princes are here now after, like, hundreds of years when they weren't allowed in the world. So, like, something's on the go, man. He also has a dagger on his side, and it has a green gemstone in the hilt. And it's just, like, it makes you think, as the reader, like, every demon or Prince of Hell probably has a dagger that is, like, specific to them in their house, which I find super interesting. Big fan. She also thinks, like, she doesn't have her moon-blessed chalk, and she can't summon protection, so she is actually super terrified of him. But then an overwhelming feeling of envy comes over her, and she wants the immense power that these demons have, and she burns with hatred, and she kind of realizes that Envy feels this way about his brothers, and he is jealous of his brothers, and she kind of thinks of how that must be so lonely and terrible. And I kind of think that she, like, gets herself out of it a bit because she's realizing what's happening. But
yeah,
she also takes Wrath's dagger, which she still has, and she presses it into her chest and is, like, ready to carve out her own heart to stop the pain of knowing that she'll never possess this power. But her tattoo sparks because she has a super magical tattoo that is the same as Wrath's. And that, like, snaps her out of it. So,
which I don't think ever happens again. Like, we never get any other magic-y tattoo-ness
other than they grow.
Other than the fact that it expands.
Yeah, it's
and
interesting.
I feel like this was a thought that didn't get finished.
Yeah, that's fair. So yeah, the tattoo sparks and she stops, like, cutting her heart out, basically. She didn't get super far. She just, like, got a bead of blood. But still, she would have done it if she didn't have the tattoo, one assumes. So he asks her if she felt what he did and says that he allowed her inner desires to surface. And he says some would call it your sins. So, like, the connection with sins, the princes, we get it. But she thinks, like, the charms that they have as witches are useless against the princes. And if she were at her parents' restaurant, she would have ended up killing anyone in her family. And she's happy that, like, she wasn't around them. She also looks down at her tattoo, and it now has snakes around it. So it used to just be 2 moons and stars, and now there's snakes surrounding it. So, like, that's interesting. It's growing.
Yeah. I wonder why.
Yeah. And Envy just says that it's strange, and he, like, looks at her tattoo, and he says it's summoned through hate and bound by blood. And he tells her she has something he wants. And she says she won't give him her heart because, like, obviously that's what almost just happened. And he says he thinks she'll end up giving it to his brother. And you're like, interesting. But it makes me think, like, which one? Is it gonna be Wrath?
And how does he know that?
Yeah. And, like, in what way? Will it be in, like, a sacrificing herself way? Or is she gonna fall in love with him? Like, what does he think is gonna happen and why? So, yeah. He tells her then if she agrees to sell her soul to House of Envy, he'll help her find what she seeks. And he says he covets unique things and says she would make an interesting gift for his court. And he asks if she sings. And she kind of just says, like, she isn't unique, which I think is probably, like, a common twin thought because it's, like, you know, by the nature of the thing. But he says she's a shadow witch, And she's like, I don't know what that is. So he offers her protection, and she in her head kind of decides that she'd rather Wrath protect her. So she pretends to consider, and then she says, not at this time, thank you. And he tells her he will accept her if she changes her mind. And he tells her the others will come soon and to pick a house, or the decision will be made for her. And then he disappears in smoke. So she wonders then, like, what Envy wanted from her, because he said that she had something that he wanted, and thinks it must be the diary. And then she's worried about Claudia, because she gave Claudia the diary. And Claudia's aunt, Claudine, maybe? I forget her name. Anyway, she
I think it's Caroline, isn't it?
Oh, that makes more sense. I knew it wasn't.
Or Carolina or something.
Something like that makes sense. So she literally last week said that the Wicked she could feel that the Wicked wanted the diary or something. So, like, Emilia's worried that Envy can sense the diary and will go after Claudia. So she runs to Claudia's house and just, like, bursts in. And she asks if Claudia found out anything about the diary, but she just says that the magic is old and it's not from this realm and she needs more time. And Emilia just tells her to forget about it. It's too dangerous. And she tells her it has to do with the Wicked. And that Emilia says, like, she just spoke to Envy. And Claudia's just, like, super chill about it and gets her to sit down and have a drink with her. And she tells her that she's suspected ever since the murders. And it's to do with the curse. And Emilia asks if she means the blood debt with the first witch. But Claudia says no. So we get a bit more information here, I guess, of, like, what the witches think. But Claudia says no one knows who the curse is on, and some think it was the price La Prima, which is the first witch, paid for the vengeance spell she cast on the devil. And witch stories say that the devil stole her firstborn soul, so she cursed him to be trapped in hell for eternity, and he'd only regain his power if a witch sat on the throne beside him, wearing the Horn of Hades. And Emilia asks what the Horn of Hades is, but nobody knows what it is. But they kind of assume, like, it's a crown or something.
So are they saying she has to wear the Horn of Hades, or he has to wear the Horn of Hades?
The witch has to wear the Horn of Hades.
Interesting.
But with the story we know about Pride, I guess, we know Pride is the one that she's talking about. So yes. It would have been like, if Vittoria didn't die, she had agreed to marry him, so she would have worn the Horns of Hades, which is interesting when you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
What the Horn of Hades is.
Yes. Claudia also tells her that they think that the curse is blocking witch memories, and that's why there are so many myths and legends that are, like, so contrasting, and that they need to find the first book of spells created by La Prima to know the truth, and that the Wicked are also searching for it because they think that they can use it to break the curse without having to find a witch to marry the devil. So Emilia kind of, like, jumps to a giant conclusion that Vittoria found the first book that the La Prima owned. And I'm like, this seems like a giant leap, but, like, I don't think she's wrong. But I'm also like, I wouldn't immediately think that. But she kind of feels like that's how she sealed her diary, and that's where she got the summoning spells. So she asks Claudia for the diary back. And then she goes back to her room and to the floorboard where her sister hid things, and she sees the gambling chip, which she ended up ignoring, but it has a frog with a crown on it. And it says Avaritia, which is absolutely not how you're supposed to say that. But if you said it correctly, it is Latin for for greed.
Do you think Google Translate works on Latin?
I would assume so.
I'm gonna find out
how you're supposed
to say it. It's a dead
it.
language. Well, I mean, Latin is a dead language, so, like...
Yeah, but it's like, Latin is used for, like...
Oh my god, it
animal names and all that shit, so I wouldn't be surprised.
Hang on. Avaritia. It did detect Latin.
And it means greed?
So, I mean, Latin means a lot of things.
Yeah. Which is the whole point of this book.
Well, so I actually took Latin very briefly in university because everyone was like, you're a French major. Latin will be so easy for you. It's not.
No.
So, like, it just reminds me, so really the only thing I can remember from that class is like, okay, so if you've got in French, you know, and like other languages too, but
romantic
most common languages, like, but even, you know, in the non-romantic ones, like there's always some form of conjugation, right? So like, if you have a verb, you have to take off the last two letters, and then you have to memorize the endings, and you have to put those letters on, right? And like, again, speakers of those languages don't even think about it. Yeah. Right? It's just something that they do. We have it in English, but it's not nearly as extreme. We have, like, I lift, you lift, he lifts, with an S on the end. Yeah. And, like, that's basic conjugation.
They lifted.
That's, yeah. Right? So, like, obviously the romantic languages have it the same. So there's, like, 6 to 8 endings, depending on who's doing the action. Latin has 36 possibilities.
Why?
Because it's like a 6x6 grid. So like you've got your 6 like subjects, your 6 different, like I, you, he, she, we, they sort of a thing. Yeah. But then it also goes by like cases. So, like, for the present tense, there's, like, 6 different ways that you can, like active voice, passive voice, but then there's, like, there's, like, 4 more, too. So you have to, like, determine the best scenario in what case you're gonna use for each, and then, like, each, like, subject has its own ending. So, like, literally to conjugate one verb, you've got 36 options that you've got to deal with. So it was pretty painful. Yeah. Anyway, so according to Google Translate, which does Latin, which is wild, avaritia, hang on. Yeah, avaritia means avarice in English, but it can also mean greed or greediness.
I don't know that English word.
Avarice? Yeah. Oh, I mean, it is a word. It's extreme greed.
Okay, which makes sense.
But specifically for, like, wealth.
Oh, okay.
Or, like, materials, like things. So, it is greed. Sense. It's just... Yeah. It's just greed for stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah. Anyway. But yeah, so I hate Latin.
That's fair. Yeah. I feel like the only time you ever really use it is like scientific names of animals.
Yeah. Or, like, if you end up getting a job, like, dealing with really old texts and stuff, I'm sure it would come in handy. Yeah. But, like, yeah. To be fair, I was, like, 19. It was, like, a 7-week intersession class, meaning it was, like, normal semester is 14 weeks. And it like, if you're gonna go to school over the summer, it's from like May to August. But at our local university, you can do a shortened one, so you could do a 7-week one. And it was just like 7 weeks starting in May, and you would just go to class twice as often, and everything is condensed. Yeah. So it was that.
Makes it worse.
And it made it so much worse because I was 19. I was alcoholing.
Summer.
trying to go to summer. I think I remember skipping class on May 2 for because I was like, it's a holiday. It wasn't a holiday for class because it was such a short thing. We couldn't afford to miss anything. So, like, I missed it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know how much I absorbed.
Yeah. Well, some 36 or whatever.
I don't know any of it, though.
No,
I just remember
that there are 36. That's impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I think the only useful thing I can think of it being for is banishing demons in Supernatural. They use Latin.
Yes. It's like omnius impotenta. I know. I feel like we need to memorize an exorcism.
We don't,
just in case.
We don't, because we have the demon repelling tattoos.
Yes!
What are they called?
Yes, you're correct.
Anti-possession tattoos. Yeah. Normal shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, obviously, greed is one of the princes. So she's like, shit, that means that this chip probably has a relation to the House of Greed in some way. And, like, what the fuck was Victoria doing with a Prince of Hell? So she also thinks, like, there's obviously something that she's missing. So she makes a list of, like, all the information she has, because she's the smart, good girl, and that is her role. So she thinks, like, where did the diary spell come from? Why did Victoria make a deal with the devil? Where's the first book? Because she's now assumed that Victoria has it. What is the Horn of Hades? And she's wondering if witch hunters are connected somehow. So she kind of thinks, like, Victoria started acting weird 3 weeks before she died, which was when they turned 18. And, like, it was 3 weeks before she died, a week after she stopped, a week after she started acting weird, a different witch died, and a week after that, another witch died, and then a week after that, she died. So, Emilia's kind of like, did she summon some demons and, like, start the bargaining process, and is she the reason that these witches started dying? Like, was she the one that first started the bargaining and the deaths? Or did she, like, find the first book or the Horn of Hades, and that's what started it all? She really doesn't have enough information to be, like, thinking about this, but, like, obviously she's going to. So she thinks about witch hunters then, and she thinks, like, some witch hunters use folk magic that can then alert them of dark magic, and you're like, so the witch hunters are using magic, and they're going after witches because they use magic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally counterintuitive.
Yeah, I'm like, this is interesting, but sure. So that's interesting, but it's not really the point of what she's getting at. She just can't really see how the witch hunters fit in, but she's also super fixated on them being the suspects because she doesn't understand who else could have killed Victoria. She adds a note to this list wondering where Victoria got the summoning spell and why she summoned a demon. And she wonders if someone is making a bid for the Dark Throne, so they're the ones killing the Devil's Bride. Like, maybe they don't want Pride to get out of the deal.
Yeah.
It could be a different Prince of Hell. It could be a different demon of some kind. It could be anyone.
Yes.
So it's interesting. There's so many things that it could be.
Yeah, and she does not have enough evidence to, like, we're getting too many things thrown at us.
Yes. She doesn't know enough at this point in time. And she kind of realizes that. So she goes to the market, and she takes her chip with her, and she goes to see a vendor called Salvatore, and he's apparently a super reliable gossip, and he's also the guy that sold her the shirt that she tried to give to Wrath, but Wrath was like, no go.
Yeah.
But he recognizes the chip, and he tells her that it's a club that everybody's talking about, and you actually need a chip to get into the club. And the location changes, like, I don't know how often, but often. And it's just a door that has the same frog with a crown stamped on it, and it's obviously like a magic place that just moves around and whatever. He tries to trade a dress for the poker chip, but she refuses, and she asks him where this place last was, and he tells her that it was near the cathedral, and tells her to ask old man Giovanni. So she goes around the cathedral, and she looks around, and she goes to Giovanni's stall, but it's closed, and she's like, oh, he must be already there gambling. So she gets an urge to hold her amulet, and she wonders if the goddess of death and fury, who she prayed to last week, is guiding her, because she starts hearing like a humming sound, and it like guides her down a path, and she ends up right in front of the door with the frog and the crown. So she holds the chip to the door, and she hopes to herself like that she isn't following her sister's path too closely, because she's like, am I gonna end up dead? Like, she's literally going to see another Malvagi after she just dealt with envy and almost like cut out her own heart.
Killed herself. Yeah.
It kind of makes you wonder, is envy the one that did it and he just made them cut their hearts out? Like, I don't remember. I don't know. But seems like that could be a thing.
Very well could be.
The next chapter starts with a entry from the grimoire, and it's just like information on a spell for courage. So like clearly she needs some courage to go into this situation because it's scary. So the door swings open, and she makes her way downstairs, and it's a gambling den, and there's tables and different games, and there's greed in, like, every different form that you can think of, and there's so many people down there. There's, like, alcohol down there, and there's people that are, like, taking their clothes off and getting high off the attention that people are giving them, and then there's the people that want to watch, and, like, she can't help but, like, look around at all of it, and, like, she's kind of soaking it in, and then she has to like shake it off, and she's like, nope, I'm not here for this. I need to find the prince. So she sees guards in front of a door, and she's like, he's definitely over there. So she starts to make her way over when she hears someone shout Vittoria's name, and it's Domenico Nucci, not sure if that's right, Senior, and he asks her to see about his drink and get calamari for him. And she's like, I'm not Vittoria, I'm Emilia. But then she's like, he's so loaded that he thinks that they're at the Sea and Vine, and he's ordering from her because he sees her there. But it's obvious that, like, this person is Domenico, Vittoria's lover's father. So you're like, this is fucked up. Like, how does he not know that his son's love or whatever is dead and that his son is severely depressed and like at the monastery twice a week praying? Like, what is going on? So she at first tries to be like, nope, I'm Emilia, but then she's just like, oh, he doesn't understand. So she just says someone will bring his food soon, and she turns, and then she's like, my favorite trope, she turns right into a large chest of a guard. Like a wall.
Because, you know, manly chests are walls.
It's true. Manly chests are walls. But it's not romantic, so it's fine. And it's one of the guards that was at the door, and he says that their boss would like a word with her, so she follows him. And she goes through the door, and the Prince of Greed is at a desk, and he's bronzed, and, like, seems like he's, like, made of copper coin. Like, she says that he kind of looks like melted copper coin, so, like, it seems, like, unnaturally bronzed. Like, not just, like, a skin tone, but, like,
shiny.
Kind of, like, Midas. Makes me think of.
Lustery.
Yeah. She doesn't notice a dagger on him, which is interesting. And I just want to know more about the daggers, but we don't really get it just yet. And he says he wasn't anticipating this meeting, but he is pleased. And she kind of feels like something is off, and he doesn't seem like he's being truthful. And she also doesn't feel overpowered by greed like she did with envy, or wrath like she did with Wrath when she met him. There are other, like, demon guards in the room. There's, like, a reptile skin one and one that's, like, deer skinned and has horns. And she's, like, not used to it. So he clears the room so that she's at ease. And he looks at her with hunger. And she thinks that, like, he's looking at her in a way that says, and I don't know how she knows this, that she's going to be a tool for power for him, and not looking at her like she's a trophy. Because Envy kind of looked at her like she'd be a trophy, but he's looking at her like, oh, I can use her to become more powerful. And you're like, how do you know this? But okay. He tells her that no one's going to hurt her here, and he calls her by name because he heard her tell Domenico Sr. that she wasn't Vittoria. She asks him why a frog, and he says that they're greedy by nature because they want both land and water. I'm like, that's an interesting take on frogs, I guess.
Yeah.
Sure.
Terrible frogs.
Yeah.
They also have tongues that are too long. They can't wait for the fly to get closer. They're so greedy.
It's true. It's interesting. But she asks him if Vittoria summoned him, and he says it's strange how identical they are, so, like, kind of brushes off her question. And she asks why Vittoria came here, and he says he'll answer her question for her cornicello. And he asks if she knows what it is, and she says it's a folk charm to ward off the evil eye, because that's what her Nonna told her whole life. But he offers her a golden necklace with a ruby and says that the necklace that he has is an eye of darkness and grants true protection from creatures of, I can't say this word, malevolent. Thank you. Malevolent intent. And he proposes trading this necklace for her cornicello. And also, she would have to join House of Greed. And she asks why, and he confirms what she thought earlier. He says he believes she'll be useful in the future, especially if she owes him a favor for the necklace saving her life, and if she becomes the queen. So you're like, interesting. What does he know? What do all these people know that we don't know?
Yeah.
So she asks if he offered the eye to her sister, and he tells her to accept to find out, but she refuses, and she goes to leave. But he offers her one answer to a question as a show of good faith. So she asks him, she says, tell me about the Horn of Hades. And he says it's a key that locks the gates of hell. And she says she heard it is part of a curse, and if a witch wears it, she'll have power over the devil. Which is interesting.
Yes.
And he says witch legends are fascinating, and the Horn of Hades was a gift, and that her sister knows the true story behind the curse. So she says, okay, cool. And she asks, how does she break a demon spell cast on an object? And he says, like, that's your second question. It'll cost you. But she counters that it's actually her first question, because she said, tell me about the Horn of Hades, the first. Like,
yeah. And I heard it was the blah, blah, blah. So it wasn't actually a question.
Yes.
But, like, so, I'll be honest and say that, like, as a demon that's been alive for, like, thousands of years, we'll say, I would expect him to be smarter than that.
100%. Especially if you're, like, making deals all the time. You should know better.
Yeah.
So he agrees. He calls her clever. But he tells her she'll need to sacrifice a bit of herself to break a demon spell. And she's like, what does that mean? And he's like, figure it out yourself. Basically. Yeah. And he tells her that Vittoria gave him her amulet, but he needs hers to work a spell. And he will protect her world if she gives her cornicello to him too. And she thinks, like, it's impossible that her sister gave him her cornicello. Like, she was wearing it the day she died. and it's more likely that he killed her and then took it. So she asks him to see the amulet, but he refuses. And he says that a Viperide, don't know if that's right, was summoned to this realm and nested below the cathedral, and the amulet is going to stay there until the Viperide decides to give it up. And she's like, so he doesn't have it. Like, if this demon has it, like, that doesn't make sense. And she also doesn't know what a Viperide is, other than she assumes it's so she's like, no, there's no way Vittoria would give a Malvagi her amulet, and she thinks she needs to get it back, and she needs to ask her Nona why a demon would want the amulets in the first place. So she refuses his offer and then just leaves.
Yeah. He actually seems to be the most level-headed of all the brothers so far.
Yes.
We've met 3.
Yeah.
Right? So far, he seems the best.
It all makes me want to go back, because, like, the 4 that were mentioned in the first week, 4 of them to worry about. Wrath, greed, envy, pride. 1 will crave your blood, 1 will capture your heart, 1 will steal your soul, and 1 will take your life. And we don't know, like, maybe it's all going to be the same one, but
yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so next chapter, we have another quote from the Grimoire. Apparently, princes of hell are the most dangerous demons, and to combat their power, you need to either wear or draw a Simaruta charm on your body or on the ground or whatever. So it's a branch of rue, which is, I guess, a type of tree or branch or bush. And it has 5 stalks on it with designs that correlate to your needs. So, for example, if you wanted to banish a prince of hell back to hell, you would have to put a key, a dagger, an owl, a snake, and a moon on each of the 5 little stalks. So that might be coming up later. So I guess Emilia leaves this, like, club, and she's just, like, going around, and she might even be headed home. And she realizes that blood is the key to unlocking the diary, based on what Greed told her, because he told her that she has to give up a little piece of herself. So she is assuming that that's blood. So she pricks her finger and lets just, like, 1 drop fall on the diary. It's a very minor injury.
Yeah.
And, like, it just opens then. Like, she can just open it.
Like, I hope it's
so,
only because it's her blood that it opened. Like, it makes you wonder.
So that's what I was wondering, and I actually wrote it down. I was like, is it because her and her sister are twins and therefore shared genetic material? Therefore, the diary recognizes her blood as her sister's blood.
Yeah.
Or would any blood do?
Which seems crazy and not super, like, if you accidentally cut your finger and then touch the book, would it just open?
Yeah. Anyway, we obviously don't know,
yeah.
But anyway, so she's, like, thinking about her problem, and she's starting to reject the idea that the killer is a witch hunter.
Finally.
Since, obviously, yeah, right? Since, you know, they haven't shown up anywhere. But also, the devil needs a witch bride. And she didn't think it was any of the princes, because she figured they would all be sort of trying to achieve the same goals. Maybe, so now she's thinking, like, well, maybe it's somebody that I already know. So she scans the diary, passes a sketch of the Simaruta, passes comments Victoria made for herself. She wonders at one point if she's hearing magical objects or the souls that attach to them over time, which is very dark and gruesome.
Yeah.
Like, just hearing hundreds of voices talking over because they're all attached to one, like, inanimate object is... I don't like like it.
It doesn't sound like a great power and could be bad for your mental health.
Yeah. So she passes by a sketch of a Simaruda, but she thinks about the voices and how sometimes they whisper, but sometimes they're really loud and frantic, and it's hard to understand them. And she wonders if it's similar to Claudia's scrying or if it's different. So these are all Vittoria's thoughts. Like, is that whispering similar to Claudia's whispering that she gets from scrying? And at first, Emilia is really shocked about this because she's like, oh my god, I can't believe she didn't tell me. How could she keep a secret from me? But then she's like, shit, I kept the Lucicaria secret.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's an even exchange at this point.
Yeah.
So she reads a little bit more until she finds another passage, like, that isn't mundane. And apparently it detailed an event where she was out by the water and she heard a bunch of voices. And she didn't really understand them. But she gripped her cornicello, which helped her focus. And the voices led her to a cave. And she started digging and found it. And apparently, Vittoria read one line before everything descended into chaos.
Interesting.
So, yes, we love a bit of chaos, I guess. Except we don't actually hear about what any of the chaos is. But the last page of her diary that's written in talks of her wanting to hide it where they could never find it. But it whispers to her and her blood prickled. So I guess Emilia's figuring out that the bad twin had secrets.
Yes.
I guess also in the diary it says that the Horn of Hades is the key to locking the gates of hell, but according to it is two somethings. And the devil apparently cut his horns off by his own hands. And Vittoria assumes that her and Emilia's cornicellos are actually devil's horns, and they've been wearing them their whole lives. So they've essentially been concealing the Horn of Hades this entire time.
Which is interesting.
Oh, Nona.
Yes.
So she goes to Nona, tries to talk to her, and lays her cornicello down, and then also lays Wrath's dagger on the table, and she's like, I need answers now. And at first, Nona tries to deny it, but then Emilia tells her that a Viperidae has been summoned and is guarding and holding on to Vittoria's amulet. And that just sort of makes Nona confirm everything, that the Malvagi have returned, but, like, she's still very calm. She doesn't get hysterical. She does confirm that the Prima made the horns into two small amulets, and when they are together, they have the ability to open and close the gates of hell. But they can also summon the devil if they bring the two paths together and hold some power over him.
Just like, why are you giving this to two children? This is insane.
I know. Unless, the only thing I can think of is unless, like, they actually do have magical protection in them.
I know, but
because
like,
of what they are.
Obviously the kids are going to put them together. It just...
Yeah.
I just am like... I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's never tell them what it is, but expect them to be responsible at 8 years old. And they're not.
But even younger than that, like, they've literally been wearing them 8 for their whole lives. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
But I guess, let's shoulder this responsibility off on two babies.
Yep.
The next thing that Emilia does actually is ask what a shadow witch is, because apparently Envy called her one. And I guess it's explained that the Malvagi call them shadow witches, but they call themselves Stelle Strege, star witches. And apparently it's an entire bloodline of witches with ties to the wicked since before the Prima cast the curse. So, like, these feuds are old, man.
Yeah. It's like, I think they say at one point, like, La Prima is older than humans. I'm like,
yeah.
I don't understand. Okay.
Well, how could all of these people exist before humans?
Yeah. What is happening?
So, like, are witches not human at all?
I guess. So, like, I don't know. I guess world building is, in books, getting into them is hard because you never know what anything is.
Yes, good point. Her grandmother tells her that the Star Witches were guardians. They would keep the creatures of the underworld in the underworld and not able to interfere with the human world. And they've actually worked with the Malvagi before. So that's an interesting tidbit. So all of a sudden, Nona's wine that she had been drinking flung across the room, and there was a dagger hovering at Nona's throat, seemingly by somebody invisible. And I'm going to tell you right now, I did not like this scene. It made me sad.
Yeah, I get that. I didn't really understand what was happening. I was like, is it Emilia somehow? Like, I don't...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also felt the same way. I didn't understand who was, like, attacking who. So, all of a sudden, after Nona's wine is flung, and there's a dagger at her throat, a phantom voice says, "Little tricksy witch." And then Emilia, like, pleads with it, saying that her Nona had nothing to do with what she did to Greed. She's assuming the demon is there to, like, punish her for tricking Greed. Invisible Demon then says that she was no such thing. Like, she didn't do anything wrong. And then she whips her. No, my bad, sorry. The invisible demon comes over and cuts Nona's throat and then escapes out the window. Why was I bonded?
Plated prisoner?
Probably. So Emilia runs over, holds a cloth over Nona's wound, and, like, essentially screams the house down, getting, like, her parents up because they're asleep. And I think it's mentioned, too, that they, like, put a sleeping spell on them so that they can't wake up. Oh, Nona did it.
Yeah.
During their conversation so that they wouldn't be disturbed. But now it's sort of, like, biting her in the butt.
Yeah. Just a bit.
So her mother makes this, like, paste and says some charms, even though she doesn't have magic, and puts it on the wound before bandaging it up, and said, like, essentially, this is going to make it a lot better.
I forgot she didn't have magic. Good call.
So they put her in bed, and her mother is just like, she'll be okay, don't worry. And Emilia, like, feels guilty. She feels like everything is her fault. If she hadn't investigated Vittoria's death, like, they wouldn't, like, nothing that has happened to them would have happened. So she goes, like, after Nona's attacked and moved upstairs, and, like, the parents are upstairs. She's down there by herself, and she's like, no, you know what? I'm going to clean up all this blood because there's a ton of it. So she goes to clean it up, and after it's clean, she realizes, oh, right, I need to put my cornicello back on, because she had slammed it on the table when she asked her Nona for answers. And finally, she notices that her cornicello is gone.
Which are like, why did you take it off?
Yeah, I know. So she essentially almost immediately heads back to Wrath and asks to talk. But, like, essentially, he thinks that she's just trying to get on his good side since he'll be out in a couple hours. But she asks, like, some random information on cornicellos, and she just wants information at this point. Which I think she has moments and flashes of brilliance. Sometimes it's a little bit like, yeah, okay. But, like, she does have those moments of, like, thinking early, which I enjoy.
Yeah. She does, like, she almost has too much information. You're like, maybe you need to figure something out to do with your information. Because you're just getting so much more, and I'm like, what are you doing with it?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I do find it a little bit overwhelming. But, I mean, I guess there's nothing I can't deal with.
No, I get what you mean, though.
So she asked for info on the Viperidae and, like, just to try and figure out how to get her cornicello back. So she's trying to be nice. So she brings him a cannoli. And initially he's all, like, gruff and like, I'm not eating human food. I'm not tainting my body with that. But eventually he caves and he gets her and he, like, eats it and he loves it.
Yeah. I love it. Big fan.
And then he asks what has scared her so much to send her here. And I love that he's so intuitive. You know what I mean? He's like, I know exactly what you're thinking all the time. And part of it is like, I wonder if it's power, but the other part is like, maybe more. So he essentially tells her, she's like, well, who are the Viperidae? What are they like? They're essentially real big snakes.
Yeah.
He also tells her not to bother summoning one because she can't handle it. Which, again, I don't think is the best idea to do if this is your situation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I wouldn't.
No.
Anyway, so he tells her that the interesting thing about Viperidae is that they do not care, like, who wants something. Once they take it, it's theirs until they decide to give it back. So, like, even if Greed summoned the demon and was like, here's an amulet, Greed is not getting that amulet back until the book decides to let him have it back.
Yeah, it's weird, because we kind of said that earlier, that, like, Greed was like, I have the amulet, and then he's like, but I don't. And you're like, I don't know, I assume he just thinks that she's dumb? Is that why he told her?
Maybe, or maybe he thinks she would never challenge a Viperidae.
Well, that's fair. Probably.
So apparently these Viperidae, they look like snakes, like I said, but they are twice as big as a man, and they have poisonous fangs that aren't, like, I guess this king's antidote is in really good care. So Wrath tells her, like, there are not many antidotes going around, and, like, this is not, like, it's not really, you don't really go up against one. Yeah. All of a sudden, Emilia sort of notices that her tattoo is starting to bother her, and then she looks down at it and sees that now there are winding around the snakes are, like, wildflowers, and the snakes are given these, like, shimmery scales. So it's almost like you're going to a tattoo artist for, like, your second session and your third session for, like, all your sessions to get your tattoo finished, but for them it's just happening every once in a while for no reason. So she asks, like, how can I attack a Viperidae? And he tells her, just use a sleeping spell. Best idea. So she's like, okay.
It really reminds me of, like, not to get into spoilers or anything, but Akhtar, when she's like, how do I catch a cereal? And he's like, I'm not going to tell you, but if I were to tell you, I would tell you this.
Yeah.
Because he's like, this is a terrible idea.
Yeah, because he says, too, he's like, yeah, you do sleeping spell. However, if you go, I'm not coming after you. I'm not gonna use my resources to save you. And she's just like, good. And then she just walks away. So she is not, she's being like, I don't know what to call it.
Stubborn-ish?
Yeah, and like assertive, and I really like it. So it's actually comical how easy she finds this Viperde demon.
Yeah, I found it odd. I was like, this is, okay, easy. Why did he say that? Why did he tell her? I mean, Greed. Why did Greed tell her that it was under the cathedral? Like, do you think it was all a ploy to get her to get it for him? Because he can't get it?
Maybe. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But so she essentially like goes into the sewers, like the tunnels under the city, follows them so that she is underneath the cathedral, and she finds it just like that. She finds it in like 5 minutes. Anyway, so she puts it to sleep, but she says that like the thing with sleeping spells is you automatically put the whatever it is to sleep that you want to put to sleep, but it wakes up through natural means. Like, so if you make a lot of noise, you can wake it up, right? What's the point of a sleeping spell then? Like, why not just wait for it to fall asleep? If it can be woken up just the same way it can be woken up regularly.
Yeah. You'd think a sleeping spell would be better. Like, shouldn't a sleeping spell make sure someone's, like, I don't get it.
Yeah. Anyway, so she sees the Viperde, she puts it to sleep, and spots the cornicello she's after, Victoria's, and she goes to get it, and she's super quiet, and she grabs the amulet, and she's about to escape when the chain that the cornicello is on drags on the ground, and that sound wakes up the Viperde. So, obviously it attacks her, because it's trying to take something that it has. And she throws, like, grit, like, dirt in its eyes, and it's, like, thrashing around, trying to get the dirt out. And so she turns to run, and she is, like, about to escape, but it bites her in the back. And she falls to the floor, and it's gonna strike her again, and she shoves her hand with the amulet in it into its eye and pierces, and she says, I think it goes all the way to its brain.
Ugh.
Gross.
Yeah, it is.
So that allows her obviously to escape back down the tunnel, but she's got venom in her body. Surprise, surprise. She went there with like no preamble, no strategy, no plan. She's like, well, I'm going after this demon, and then just goes.
Yeah. Don't know, man.
Ugh. Anyway. So, she drags herself halfway down the tunnel because, again, the venom is in her body and it is fast acting. And she almost makes it out before she collapses. And she's, like, dizzy and nauseous, and she's about to pass out when a voice approaches her asking where she was hurt and whether it bit her. And she's obviously, like, in the throes of venom poison, so, like, she's not super coherent. And can't really, like, access her thought processes. So she says, like, she doesn't really remember who's speaking to her, only that it's a familiar voice, and she doesn't think she likes him very much. So that sort of tells us who it is.
Yeah.
So obviously it's Wrath, and he checks her out, and he finds the wound, and curses, and it's like, oh, fuck's sakes. Like, he doesn't actually say that, but that's what I can imagine him saying.
You idiot. You did exactly what I told you not to.
Yeah. Anyway, and he lifts her up and carries her through the city to a place. And we don't really know where that place is. But she nestled into him because he was warm and safe. And, like, she was in incredible pain. So that tells you something about what's going to happen in their relationship. So he, like, kicks open a door, runs up the stairs, puts her on a mattress. What?
Just so aggressive. He kicks open the door. Like,
he does.
He cares about her a lot.
Yes.
And, like, we're like, why?
I know.
Like, I don't get it.
Yeah, I know. So, like, it's at this point that she vaguely remembers who he is, but she doesn't really understand where she is. So he leaves, and another male voice is telling her not to struggle, and that he knows what to do, aka Wrath. And apparently he comes back a little bit later, but she's, like, literally in constant agony, so her time-telling skills, yeah, she can't really tell the passage of time very well at this moment. But he tells her that he can fix it, but he needs her consent.
Interesting.
And she tries, so obviously we're in her head, so we hear her thoughts. So she's, like, trying to nod, but, like, can't, because she's so weak and in pain. So he has to ask her almost, like, again, like, you need to tell me. So, like, he gets the barest of nods, and he takes that as, okay.
Confirmation, yeah.
Yeah. So he picks her up and tells her softly that he has to get both of them in the water, and whispers for her to live long enough to hate him for this.
Hey.
What is it?
What does she...
Yeah, what is he doing?
We don't know.
So, no, we don't. So, she sort of feels like at this point she's floating on a cloud, and she hears words in a language she doesn't understand, and then lips brush against her skin. And then he pours something sweet and sticky down her throat. And soft lips meet hers as a whisper, a promise, an unbreakable vow. And, like, she wants more, but is denied. So, like, even though she's in excruciating pain, he kisses her softly, and she's like, yes, make out with me now.
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to, I guess, I think it was last week when she was like, demon deals are always sealed with kisses, and then people will sell their souls for more because they just want more of demon kisses.
Yeah, 100%.
So we're like, what did she deal? What did she deal?
Yeah. Well, because then it gets worse, because he keeps chanting words, and then it says the true hell begins. And in my head, I'm like, OMG, did they just get married?
Yeah.
Like, was this, like, a marriage ritual for demons? And, like, now they're married.
Yeah, and it seems like, I forget if it's this part, but at some point she said something about matrimony. Was that this week? I can't remember.
Yeah, well. So she wakes up, and she's in a tub of water. And she starts having memories of last night. And she remembers some nightmares that she had in the throes of agony. And it seems like they're, like, visions of the future almost, or, like, predictions, almost like scrying, because it's all, like, in riddles. So she sees, like, a city of fire and ice, a woman with fire in her soul cursing her, a crown forged of flames and smoke. So we don't really have any answers for all that. Then she remembers, like, all the stuff Wrath had done to her, and realized he must have performed a really powerful spell, because she's, like, completely healed and full of energy and just zippy.
All the stuff he's done to her. What has he done?
Yeah. So obviously she was naked in the tub, and she looks over, and he is there, also naked, and he had just climbed out. And she checked out, he's got a whole lot of tattoos on him. back and forth between the back of his shoulder blades, there's gold and charcoal lines of Latin, which sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Gold is not a color often seen in tattooing.
No, I feel like it's, like, hard to show up on skin. It's hard to make it last enough.
Yeah. Anyway, so, like, obviously she feels really awkward because, like, they barely know each other. And she's naked in front of him.
Doesn't feel as awkward as I thought she would for the time period.
Yeah.
That we're assuming it is. Which is another reason why I was like, what the fuck is this time period? Because I was like, shouldn't she be, like, modest and, like, oh no, I'm naked in front of a strange man. But maybe, like,
yeah,
she's a witch. She's beyond that. Like, also he's a demon, and she's like, I don't give a fuck because he's a demon. Like,
maybe.
Wild.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, especially if we're saying, like, 18th, 19th century. I think that's so, like, yeah, you would think she would be a little bit more, Sir, unhand me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly that. Thank you.
Anyway, so yeah, so, like, obviously she's feeling awkward, but mostly because he said he wouldn't come for her, and yet he did. So,
yeah, that's an interesting reasoning. Okay.
Yeah. But then she thought of a part of the spell she remembered that had them, like, very intimately involved. But she said it was in mind only. Like, sort of, you know, that thing where, oh, I'm in your, like, with the whole Rowan Aelin thing where, oh, we've been in each other's minds, our magics have combined and touched, so we're beyond physical intimacy. Like, physical intimacy is nothing now that we've merged minds.
Yeah.
It's sort of that sort of a vibe.
Yeah.
Like, she said that because they were in each other's minds and saw what he couldn't hide from anyone, even though she still knows nothing about him. And apparently she felt that, like, he doesn't just hate her.
Interesting.
Like, apparently, yeah. But she says he has complex feelings. But, like, the way she discusses it, it sort of insinuates that the complex feelings are not positive. Like, the way I took it is when she explains it, is he doesn't just hate her. He has complex feelings. So, like, not just hate, but also, like, loathing and disinterest and, like, all these negative feelings, like, wrapped up in it. That's how I took it.
I also just felt like part of it must be something to do with this, like, bound to protect her, like, maybe some honor or some, like, bullshit like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so obviously he's angry at her. She made a bad choice. And she thinks, like, it was worth it. Anyway, she essentially is like, I don't care, this decision was worth it, even if I died. And I'm like, really? Just getting your sister's necklace back would be worth it? Just, like, it's worth dying over?
I guess,
like,
her thought process is for the greater good of the world, but it's also, like, if she had have died, then Wrath would have just taken it anyway. So, like,
yeah.
No. Because then, obviously, we're assuming one of the other princes has the other one. We don't know for sure who. But we can kind of make that assumption. A demon has it, so clearly we're assuming the demon is working for a prince. So you're like, if Wrath gets it, then two princes have it. So either one will, like, get it off the other one by just asking for it, or they could trick them out of it, but, like, someone's gonna get it.
Yeah. And, like, we still really don't know what the intent is because, like, apparently the Cornicellos have the ability to, like, control the gates of hell. So, like, if Wrath gets them, is he going to open them so that all the demons can come out into the earth and, like, kill all humanity, or is the design to shut them?
Yeah, what are his intentions?
Yeah. And I guess really, what are all the demon prince's intentions?
And, like, the fact with so many different houses and so many different princes, like, obviously some of them are going to want to do different things, and that makes it even more confusing.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway. So, she asks him why they are naked.
Fair.
And he essentially he tells her that the venom acts like ice, and they had to reverse the effects using body heat and hot water.
I think first, though, he's like, you tore my clothes off. Which I'm like, and that was the part that I was like, she was like, I was out of my mind, makes sense. And I was like, oh, okay, we're not gonna, like, feel any embarrassment or anything about that, even though the time period and, like, I'm like, I love it. Big fan that she is cool with it, but I just was shocked.
Yeah, I think, so again, going a little bit ahead into the second book, I think she actually thinks about this, about how, like, her impropriety is a bit less because she's a witch. So, like, they were raised a little bit differently, so she doesn't have the same level of impropriety as normal humans of the time period. Anyway, so, yeah. So she thinks of how his feelings, like, she said, like, those feelings of hate and those complex feelings aren't directed at her alone, but all witches.
Interesting.
Yeah, and how he's really only loyal to himself, and how they aren't becoming, like, friends or lovers. Like, him saving her was not an act of friendship. It wasn't an act of, I care about this person. It was purely, like, self-interest. Mm-hmm. And, like, she noticed that, like, one of the emotions she sensed in him was him being afraid, but not afraid of becoming attached. Like, it's not that he's afraid of becoming attached to her, but he is afraid of emotional attachments in general.
Interesting.
Yeah. Which, I don't know if that comes back at all this book.
I'm sure I haven't.
Yeah, I know. You haven't gotten there. She gets out of the tub, and she stands close to him, and like, again, still naked.
Yeah.
And for a second, like, she wants him to touch her, and she's, like, a little bit turned on. I mean, again, he's a hot guy standing naked in front of her.
Yeah.
But she's still very conflicted about the fact that he is a demon.
Of course, yes.
So, like, yeah, she's turned on, but she doesn't want to be turned on.
Mm-hmm.
So she just wants some time to, like, think through and process her emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So she whispers a containment spell, thinking that it would just, like, I don't even know what the intention is.
I think she's just overwhelmed. I don't really understand why. Like, she did it, and I was like, holy shit, that was so shitty of you. Like...
But, like, yeah, but also I don't know what her intention with the spell was. Like, was it just to, like, keep him in that room so that she could go elsewhere? Like, I don't know what she wanted to do with him.
Yeah. I just feel like she was overwhelmed, and she was like, well, I need space.
Yeah. Anyway, the issue is that the spell didn't go as planned because he vanished. Like, her spell vanishes him. Mm-hmm. And she assumes that it's because her blood is still humming with his power that he used to keep her alive. So it was probably just a more powerful spell. And I guess she said that before he disappeared, his face sort of looked betrayed.
No. Sin.
For the fact that she, like, sent him away, even though he just saved her life. So she got dressed, and, like, she obviously didn't have her old clothes. There was a new dress for her on the bed of the room that she was in, so she thinks about how, like, she hurt his feelings. And she's like, he probably doesn't want to steal my soul or kill me because he saved her and, like, has had the chance to steal her soul and kill her. So, like, those probably aren't his motivations.
Yeah.
So, he was probably safe, is her thought process. Like, he's probably one of the ones where she can be safe, relatively safe in his presence. And she actually does need help tracking down who killed Vittoria. So she decides to look for him, figure out where she sent him. And she's going to track him down. They're going to work together. So she actually finds him back in the cave in the circle. And he's stuck.
Sin.
And yeah, and he is not shy about being like, way to, like, lock me up after saving you.
Yeah.
But, like, he mentioned during the spell at some point that, like, there's a steep price to pay or something like that. Like, while she was...
Yes. Yeah.
And we still don't know what the price is that she had to pay, or that he had to pay. Somebody had to pay a price, and we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But he also keeps calling her princess now. He's done it, like, twice since she woke up. So, like, they definitely got married.
Yeah.
Because he's a prince of hell. And now all of a sudden he's calling her princess.
Yeah.
So, they're married. I'm convinced. So, she tells him about the ghost demon and, like, everything that went down with Nona. And she tells him, like, what went down with Greed. And she actually thinks that the ghost demon was sent by Greed because she tricked him with wordplay and made him give up more information than he originally was going to give her.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing, too, is, like, he knows what the amulet is. Like, Envy, she had it hidden, I think, back in her shirt, so she doesn't think Envy knows she has it, and Greed obviously saw it and asked for it and knows what it is. So she's like, he must have come and got it.
Yeah. Wrath essentially tells her that that ghost demon is actually an Umbra demon, and they're mostly mercenaries, but they can be hired out by any royal house. So, like, just having one in your employ doesn't point to one specific house in general, like, generally speaking. But he does say that Pride does have a few Umbra demons of his own. She asks if someone had it, like, she asks, like, if somebody possessed the Horn of Hades, could Pride be summoned? Because, again, what we said before, like, Pride is sort of the devil, like Lucifer. So she thinks that he is obviously the most powerful, and therefore, like, a regular summoning circle doesn't work. You need something more powerful. And she's also assuming that he's stuck in hell. Yeah,
and it's also, like, they need something of the person they're summoning. Like, the only reason she got Wrath is she had his dagger.
His dagger, yeah. She asks if he would help her figure out if Pride was summoned using the Horn of Hades, and lets him out of the circle. So they've agreed to work together. But she does ask him to stop trying to find Pride a bride.
Pride a bride.
She's like, stop trying to get witches, because she thinks that he's, like, trying to force witches to agree to marry Pride. And she's like, I want you to stop doing that. So he says he will not harm a witch or try and force that witch into marriage with Pride, even though that is his mission.
Yeah.
So, they go to the monastery, and they're waiting outside for the brothers to go to sleep. She asks about, like, the blood vow, and, like, she's like, do you still need me to take it? And he says, like, I would like you to take it. It would, again, he's like, it would make my life easier, but it's okay for the moment if you don't. Like, I'm okay if you don't take it right this minute. So they sneak into the monastery and head back to the room where they found Vittoria's body. And Emilia obviously keeps peppering Wrath with questions. She does this a lot. It's like she's trying to get information, but she's very obvious. She just asks questions outright. She hasn't sort of, like, figured out the nuanced way to, like, do do it subtly.
Yeah.
And she finally asks, like, what were you doing when I found Vittoria's body? Because he was licking blood off of his hand. And he tells her he was actually testing it for a demon house to see if she had aligned herself with a house through a blood vow. So, like, the same way he wanted her to take a blood vow, he was seeing if Vittoria had done the same. But he was like, she didn't. So that didn't really give him any clues.
Yeah, but it is good for us to know, because, like, we weren't sure if she did or not align herself with somebody, so it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. So she asks if greed or envy, because again, those are sort of the only other two she has met.
Mm-hmm.
Would they want to stop Pride from marrying and breaking the curse? But Wrath is like, no, I don't think so. He doesn't think that they're sort of the way they, like, what they want would impact that.
Yeah.
She also asked what a shadow witch is, because Envy called her a shadow witch, and she's like, what the heck is a shadow witch? And he tells her that it's actually a witch with more demon blood in her than others, which she kind of can't believe, because she assumes they're descended from goddesses, not demons, but he's telling her that, no, you have demon blood in you, girl, and it's significant. Like, you got a decent amount in you.
Well, and she also asked her Nona about it, and her Nona was like, we're guardians or something. Like, that was her, what shadow witch meant thing.
Yeah. Her grandmother said, oh, shadow witch is what the demons call us, but we're star witches.
Yeah.
So,
I guess both
Nona
both
keeping secrets.
In some way. Well, she kind of had to, because she was...
So they check out the candle wax that had dripped, and it was pale rose and gray colors, and she tells him that she smelled thyme, like the last time she was here, and he tells her that those are things to summon someone from House Greed. So apparently each demon has their own requirements to summon them, so like candle colors, time of day, herbs, like plants, and metals all vary. So, like, you need those specific things in order to summon someone from different houses. So, the stuff that's in here right now is to summon someone from Greed, not from Pride.
Dang, who is she summoning?
Yeah. So, like, the sheet of paper, because didn't she follow the sheet of paper that she found in her sister's cubby?
Yeah.
To summon, and that's what summoned Wrath, right?
Yep.
So all the stuff was meant to summon Wrath.
Well, someone from his house, and then the fact that she had the dagger made it him.
Summoned him, right.
I think.
So, like, but they don't she doesn't think about that.
No.
And I don't get why she doesn't think that.
Well, like, why did Vittoria have this? If she didn't summon someone from his house.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, she is constantly thinking that Vittoria's trying to summon Pride to, like, agree to be his bride. But, like, it never occurs to her that the summoning spell she had was for House Wrath.
Don't know.
Anyway. She gets really angry all of a sudden. And she, like, vows she's going to destroy the demon that killed her sister. And sort of realizes that she is full of wrath because she's next to Wrath. And Vittoria's necklace, which she has started to wear, sort of glows all purpley. Wrath is sort of just like, chill out. But he's like, I don't think that it's greed. Even though it looks like she summoned someone from Greed, he doesn't think that that's Greed's MO. Like, Greed's not going to go around killing witches.
Yeah.
But he's like, maybe it wasn't Greed himself. Maybe it's a lesser demon from the same house. But he's also thinking lesser demons are, like, sort of bloodthirsty. They wouldn't go for the heart and rip it out like that. They go for the throat and just, like, nom nom nom. So then she's starting to feel like, sort of suspicious. And she's like, how do I know that you're innocent? Like, maybe you planted all this evidence knowing that she had his spell that summons his house. Mm-hmm. She was like, I have the spell to summon you, so what if you planted the evidence? And he was like, I didn't know Vittoria had the spell to summon. Oh, so they do talk about this. My bad. So he says, I didn't know that Vittoria had this spell to summon someone from my house. I thought this was your spell. And she's like, oh, shit. So obviously she didn't use it to, well, actually, we don't know. But she hasn't used it to summon Wrath before.
Yeah.
So we know that Wrath hasn't met Vittoria before.
Yeah. But I guess, like, she could have summoned someone from his house because she didn't have the dagger.
Yeah. And he can't lie when she asks him a direct question. He can't lie to her.
I don't understand. Like, I get that they've accepted that this is true. You know what I mean? I get that she has accepted that that is true. But I kind of missed where we were like, I don't know, given it 100%. I just don't understand if they full out told us. Like, if it was stated explicitly, I get that she tested him and she was like, would you kill me? And he was like, if you were in my way, yeah. And she was like, oh, he must have to tell me the truth. But he could have just told her the truth in that one instance. Like, I don't understand why we're accepting it 100%. But I guess we are. And it follows through in the next book too. Okay, so it's just truth, and I must have missed something. I don't know, or I must just be like super suspicious of demons.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we do just accept it. Like I guess that one question tells her all she needs to know. So she asks him about the curse because she doesn't really know the details of it. She doesn't know why it happened or what it entails, but he doesn't want to tell her. So she threatens him with his dagger, and she's like, I know you can die because I can feel, so like she's in possession of it, and she says, I can feel you track it with your eyes. And like whenever she moves, his eyes are always on it. And when she was with Greed, he was surprised she had it. So she's like, this can kill you. She's like, this weapon can kill you. So tell me what's going on, or else I'll kill you with it. And that's where we finish this week. Sort of at a cliffhanger-ish.
That's what people do in books nowadays. This is my rant. But I feel like chapters end on cliffhangers. And they used to end and it'd be nicely done up and you could put your bookmark in and you'd be like, yay, I can go to sleep now. But now people end chapters on cliffhangers and you're like, when? When am I supposed to sleep? You have to like wait until there's like a break in the chapter with that little design and you're like, that's a good spot. And then it's like aesthetically unpleasant because it's not a chapter.
Yeah. But also too, I find that this book is really bad for it because like, it's always like ending, like it ended the first chapter or the prologue. I don't remember what it was. It was like, turns out that would be deadly for one of them. You know, it's ending on this I find all of the chapters are like ending in sort of that way, like in a that is bad, or like some sort of like line. You know, like one of those really cheesy lines.
The first week, I think we ended on, and she said she wasn't going to accept his blood trade, and then that was just the end, and you're like, yeah, but what did he say? What happened next?
Yeah. Oh, so she says, so, oh, mighty Prince Wrath, if you don't want to die tonight, tell me why Pride really sent you here. So, like, they're just, like, ending with these, like, cheesy lines that I'm not 100% here for, but it's fine.
I get it. But, there are, every week so far, we've ended on something that's like, ooh, what next?
Yeah. Anyway, so we're going to wrap it up for this week. If you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts on anything you heard in our episodes, or if you have any book suggestions, please reach out to us by email at coffeeandcoread@gmail.com or on Instagram or Facebook at Coffee and Co-Read and coffee.coread on TikTok.
Next week, we're going to be continuing Kingdom of the Wicked and reading chapters 24 to 36. Make sure to follow along, and if you're enjoying our chats, don't forget to follow, rate, and review wherever you get our content. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you on the next page.